The silence hurt more than the rejection. The empty chair, the unanswered message, the invitation that never came, the friendship that slowly faded, the relationship that promised forever and ended without warning. The people who once celebrated your presence, but gradually disappeared when life became difficult. Those experiences leave marks that are not always visible to the world. Many people carry wounds from being left behind, but very few talk about how deeply those wounds affect the heart. There is a unique kind of pain that comes from watching people walk away while you are still trying to understand what happened. It creates nights filled with questions, days filled with disappointment, and moments where you wonder whether there is something wrong with you. It makes you look back at conversations, memories, and decisions, searching for answers that never seem to arrive. Yet sometimes what feels like abandonment is not the end of your story. Sometimes it is the beginning of a clearing. Sometimes the empty spaces that appear in your life are not signs that you have lost your value. They are signs that something new is being prepared. There are seasons when God allows certain people to leave, because the life you are being called into cannot be built around those who were only meant to walk with you for a portion of the journey. That truth is difficult to accept when the wound is fresh. It is difficult to embrace when your heart is still grieving, but many people discover later that the departures they feared were actually making room for the relationships they desperately needed. You may not see it today. You may not understand it yet. But the fact that someone left does not automatically mean you were rejected. It does not automatically mean you were unworthy. It does not automatically mean you failed. Sometimes it simply means their role in your life was complete. One of the hardest lessons in life is realizing that not everyone is meant to stay forever. Some people arrive to teach, some arrive to encourage, some arrive to challenge, some arrive to reveal strengths you did not know you possessed, and some arrive only long enough to help guide you toward the next chapter. The pain comes when we expect permanent connections from people who were only assigned to temporary seasons. You gave your heart. You gave your time. You invested your energy. You believed they would always be there. When they left, it felt like a part of your world disappeared with them. Yet even in those moments, something remarkable was happening beneath the surface. While you were mourning what was leaving, God was protecting what was remaining. While you were focused on the closed door, He was preparing pathways you could not yet see. Many people spend years trying to keep relationships alive that have already fulfilled their purpose. They exhaust themselves trying to convince others to stay. They bend themselves into shapes that no longer feel authentic. They silence their own needs just to maintain connections that are already drifting away. But there comes a moment when holding on creates more pain than letting go. There comes a moment when acceptance becomes the beginning of healing. The people who are truly meant for your next season will not require you to abandon who you are. They will not require you to constantly prove your worth. They will not make you feel like your value depends on their approval. Healthy relationships do not demand that you shrink. They allow you to grow. Yet before those relationships arrive, there is often a period of loneliness that feels confusing and unfair. It can seem as though everyone else has found their people while you are standing alone. It can seem as though everyone else is moving forward while you are stuck waiting. Those seasons can test your faith. They can challenge your confidence. They can tempt you to believe that you have been forgotten. But God often does some of His deepest work during the seasons when external support becomes limited. When the noise fades, you begin hearing truths that were previously drowned out. When the crowd disappears, you discover parts of yourself that had been hidden beneath the expectations of others. When familiar voices grow quiet, you begin learning how to trust the voice of God more deeply. This process is not comfortable. Growth rarely is. Healing rarely happens without discomfort. Yet many of the strongest people carry a history of loneliness that shaped them into who they became. They learned how to stand when nobody applauded. They learned how to continue when nobody encouraged them. They learned how to trust that their worth existed even when recognition disappeared. You carried burdens that few people ever noticed. Your kindness cost you more than most people will ever understand. You continued showing up even when your heart was tired. You continued believing even when disappointment tried to convince you otherwise. Those sacrifices mattered. Those quiet acts of perseverance mattered. Every time you chose kindness instead of bitterness, something valuable was being built within you. Every time you refused to give up, despite feeling alone, your character was becoming stronger. Every time you remained faithful during uncertainty, your foundation became deeper. Some of your greatest victories happened in silence when nobody was watching. The world often celebrates visible success, but many of the most important transformations happen privately. They happen during the tears nobody saw. They happen during the prayers nobody heard. They happen during the moments when you felt completely alone, yet somehow found the strength to keep moving forward. God saw the tears that nobody else noticed. He saw the disappointment hidden behind your smile. He saw the exhaustion you carried while trying to remain strong for everyone else. He saw every moment when your heart felt heavy, and he never looked away. That is why difficult seasons should never be mistaken for permanent destinations. Pain can visit your life without becoming your identity. Loneliness can be part of your experience without becoming your future. Rejection can happen to you without defining your value. The people who left were not the final chapter of your story. The disappointments you endured were not the final verdict on your worth. There is a strength within you that kept moving forward, even on your darkest days. That strength is evidence that your story is still unfolding. The fact that you are still standing says more about your strength than you realize. The seasons that tested you were also shaping who you were becoming. Every challenge developed resilience. Every setback developed wisdom. Every loss taught lessons that comfort never could. Looking back, you may eventually realize that some departures protected you from future pain. Some endings prevented deeper heartbreak. Some closed doors redirected you toward healthier paths. It does not mean the losses did not hurt. It does not mean the grief was unnecessary. It simply means that God can create purpose even from painful experiences. He can bring healing from wounds. He can bring growth from disappointment. He can bring blessings from seasons that once felt empty. There are people you have not met yet who will appreciate the qualities others overlooked. There are friendships waiting to be formed with people who value your sincerity. There are connections waiting to develop with people who recognize your heart. There are conversations waiting to happen that will remind you that genuine relationships still exist. Not because you earned them through perfection, but because you are already worthy of meaningful connection. Your story has value even if it did not unfold the way you expected. Your life carries significance even when certain relationships ended. Your future remains full of possibility even when your past contains disappointment. When everyone leaves, it is easy to focus on the emptiness. It is easy to focus on what was lost. Yet sometimes that empty space is exactly where new blessings begin to grow. Sometimes the room created by departures becomes the space where healthier relationships can finally enter. Sometimes the ending you feared becomes the beginning you needed. If this message has reminded you that your worth was never determined by who stayed or who left, subscribe to the channel and continue walking this journey of faith, healing, and purpose with us. May each message encourage you to remember that God has not forgotten you, and that your best relationships may still be ahead of you. There comes a moment in many lives when the loneliness no longer feels temporary. It begins to feel permanent. The phone stays quiet for weeks. Familiar faces become distant memories. The people who once seemed inseparable slowly build lives that no longer include you. In those moments, it is easy to believe that you have somehow fallen behind. It is easy to compare your life to the lives of others and assume that everyone else found the connection, belonging, and support that continues to feel just out of reach for you. Yet some of the most meaningful transformations begin in exactly that place. They begin when a person reaches the end of their dependence on external validation and starts discovering the value that God placed within them from the beginning. Many people spend years believing that acceptance from others will finally bring them peace. They imagine that if enough people approve of them, celebrate them, choose them, or remain with them, then they will finally feel secure. But life has a way of revealing that true peace cannot be built on the opinions of people. Human approval changes. Circumstances change, relationships change, seasons change. What remains is the foundation beneath all those things. That foundation is the truth about who you are when the crowd disappears. It is the truth about who you are when nobody is applauding. It is the truth about who you are when the only voice encouraging you is the quiet voice within that refuses to surrender. Perhaps one of the reasons this season has been so difficult is because you cared deeply. You loved sincerely. You invested wholeheartedly. You believed the best about people. You showed loyalty when it would have been easier to walk away. You remained present when others became distant. Those qualities are not weaknesses. The world sometimes treats kindness as if it were a flaw. It sometimes treats gentleness as if it were something to outgrow. Yet your ability to care deeply is one of the reasons your heart feels pain so intensely. The same heart that knows how to love deeply also feels loss deeply. The same heart that knows how to remain faithful also feels disappointment profoundly. But do not mistake your capacity for love as the reason people left. Some people leave because they are unable to value what they have been given. Some people leave because they are following a different path. Some people leave because they are dealing with battles you cannot see. Some people leave because they were only meant to be part of one chapter. Their departure is not always a reflection of your value. Sometimes it is simply evidence that life is moving forward. One of the most painful experiences is being misunderstood. Many people watching their relationships fade carry an additional burden. They carry the burden of feeling unseen. They know what they intended. They know how much effort they gave. They know how much they sacrificed. Yet the story others tell about them often feels incomplete. They wish someone understood how hard they tried. They wish someone recognized how much they cared. They wish someone noticed the battles they fought in silence. If that describes your experience, remember this. God sees the parts of your story that nobody else fully understands. He sees the private victories that never became public. He sees the tears that never became conversations. He sees the prayers spoken in empty rooms. He sees the strength it took to wake up and keep going after another disappointment. Nothing has been hidden from him. Nothing has been overlooked. Nothing has been forgotten. The loneliness that seems meaningless today may eventually reveal lessons that become priceless tomorrow. Many people discover that isolation taught them discernment. It taught them which relationships were genuine and which were built only on convenience. It taught them how to recognize character instead of simply recognizing charm. It taught them how to value peace more than popularity. It taught them how to stop chasing people who were already walking away. One of the greatest acts of healing is learning that not every departure requires pursuit. Not every closed door requires another attempt. Not every ending requires an explanation. Some things become clearer only after enough time has passed. Some answers arrive long after the questions disappear. Until then, faith becomes the bridge between uncertainty and understanding. Faith does not always remove pain. It gives meaning to perseverance. It reminds you that the current chapter is not the entire story. It reminds you that God is working even when evidence seems limited. It reminds you that waiting is not the same as being forgotten. There are seasons when growth happens underground, far away from visible results. A seed does not become a tree overnight. Roots develop before branches appear. Strength develops before fruit appears. In much the same way, your life may be developing foundations that are invisible today, but essential for tomorrow. The patience you learned through disappointment, the wisdom you gained through heartbreak, the compassion you developed through suffering, the resilience you built through loneliness. These things matter. They are not wasted. They are becoming part of who you are. Some people receive blessings without first developing the character necessary to sustain them. Others experience delays that prepare them for responsibilities they cannot yet see. Preparation often feels frustrating because it rarely looks impressive while it is happening. Yet later, many people discover that the preparation was every bit as valuable as the opportunity itself. Your difficult season may be preparing you for healthier relationships than you have ever known. Relationships where respect exists naturally. Relationships where trust is mutual. Relationships where you are appreciated rather than merely tolerated. Relationships where your presence is valued instead of taken for granted. Those connections often arrive after a person has learned important lessons about self-worth. When you know your value, you stop settling for relationships that constantly diminish it. When you know your value, you stop measuring your worth by how others respond. When you know your value, you become less willing to remain where you are repeatedly wounded. This is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming healthy. It is about understanding that your kindness deserves protection. Your heart deserves care. Your peace deserves respect. The person you are becoming is not weaker because of what happened. You are stronger, you are wiser, you are more compassionate, you are more aware of what truly matters. The losses changed you, but they did not destroy you. The disappointments affected you, but they did not define you. The people who left created pain, but they did not take away your future. There is still purpose ahead. There is still joy ahead. There is still connection ahead. There are still moments waiting for you that will make sense of parts of this journey. You may not see the entire picture today, and that is understandable. Very few people do while they are living through difficult seasons. Yet many look back years later and recognize something remarkable. The season they once wanted to escape became one of the most important seasons of their lives. It revealed their strength. It deepened their faith. It taught them endurance. It introduced them to parts of themselves they never would have discovered otherwise. The very season that felt empty became the season that prepared them for abundance. The season that felt lonely became the season that taught them how to stand confidently. The season that felt unfair became the season that revealed God's faithfulness in unexpected ways. If you are carrying the weight of disappointment today, remember that your story is still being written. There are pages ahead that you cannot yet read. There are blessings ahead that you cannot yet imagine. There are people ahead who will appreciate the qualities that others overlooked. Your value remains unchanged by every departure. Your purpose remains intact despite every setback. Your future remains open despite every disappointment. The road may feel quiet right now, but quiet roads often lead to meaningful destinations. Continue trusting that God is able to create beauty from broken places and hope from difficult seasons. Continue believing that what was lost is not greater than what still remains possible. If these words have encouraged your heart during a season when you needed reassurance, subscribe to the channel and continue receiving messages that strengthen faith, healing, and personal growth. May this journey remind you that you are never alone, that your story matters, and that God is still guiding your steps even when the path seems uncertain. One day you may look back on this season and realize that what felt like loss was actually alignment. You may discover that the people who walked away created space that could never have existed if they had remained. You may recognize that certain relationships were holding you in a version of yourself that you had already outgrown. At the time, all you could see was the pain. All you could feel was the emptiness. All you could focus on was the absence. But life often reveals its meaning in reverse. The lessons that seem hidden eventually become clear. The events that once felt random begin to form a pattern. The disappointments that seemed pointless reveal unexpected purpose. Until that understanding arrives, however, there is often a period where faith becomes your greatest companion. Faith is not pretending that loss does not hurt. Faith is acknowledging the pain while refusing to believe that the pain has the final word. Faith is waking up another day, even when your heart feels heavy. Faith is continuing forward, even when answers remain incomplete. Faith is trusting that God can see a larger picture than the one visible from your current position. Many people underestimate the courage required to keep moving forward after repeated disappointment. They celebrate dramatic victories while overlooking quiet endurance. Yet some of the strongest individuals are not those who never struggled. They are those who continued despite the struggle. They are those who kept loving after heartbreak. They are those who kept believing after setbacks. They are those who kept showing kindness after experiencing rejection. There is something profoundly beautiful about a person who refuses to let hardship turn their heart bitter. There is something powerful about someone who continues choosing hope when cynicism would be easier. Perhaps you have carried disappointments that few people know about. Perhaps there were dreams that never unfolded the way you expected. Perhaps there were friendships you believed would last forever. Perhaps there were plans that collapsed despite your best efforts. Perhaps there were seasons when you wondered whether anyone truly understood what you were carrying. If so, know that your experience is not invisible. The world may not have witnessed every battle, but God did. He saw every silent act of perseverance. He saw every moment you felt like giving up and chose to continue. He saw every time you encouraged someone else while secretly needing encouragement yourself. He saw every sacrifice that went unnoticed. He saw every burden you carried quietly because you did not want to become a burden to others. Nothing was wasted. The tears were not wasted. The waiting was not wasted. The lessons were not wasted. The growth was not wasted. One of the remarkable truths about difficult seasons is that they often reveal strengths that comfortable seasons never require. You discover how resilient you are. You discover how much wisdom has been developing within you. You discover that your identity runs deeper than external circumstances. You discover that your worth exists independently of recognition. That realization changes everything. Once you understand that your value comes from who you are, rather than who approves of you, a new kind of freedom begins to emerge. You stop chasing validation. You stop exhausting yourself trying to earn acceptance from people determined not to give it. You stop measuring your significance through the lens of temporary opinions. Instead, you begin standing on something stronger. You begin standing on truth. You begin understanding that your life carries meaning because you were created with purpose. You begin realizing that your existence matters even during seasons when nobody seems to notice. The right people often arrive when you least expect them, not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because you have become prepared to recognize healthy connections when they appear. Sometimes the greatest obstacle to meaningful relationships is not the absence of people. It is the presence of unresolved wounds. Hurt can distort perception. Fear can create walls. Disappointment can make trust feel dangerous. Healing does not erase the past, but it allows the future to enter without being controlled by old pain. As healing grows, your ability to recognize genuine connection grows as well. You begin noticing the people who show consistency rather than empty promises. You begin appreciating those who demonstrate care through actions rather than words alone. You begin recognizing relationships that bring peace instead of constant confusion. Those relationships may not always be numerous, but they are valuable. Quality has always mattered more than quantity. A few genuine connections can bring more encouragement than a crowd of shallow acquaintances. A handful of trustworthy people can provide more support than dozens of temporary companions. The right people may not solve every problem in your life, but they can remind you that you do not have to face every challenge alone. God often works through people. He works through encouraging conversations. He works through unexpected friendships. He works through acts of kindness. He works through those who arrive at exactly the right moment with exactly the right words. This is why it is important not to let past disappointments convince you that meaningful relationships no longer exist. They do exist. Genuine loyalty still exists. Authentic friendship still exists. Compassion still exists. Understanding still exists. The disappointments of yesterday are not proof that goodness has disappeared from the world. They are simply evidence that some people were not meant to accompany you forever. There is a difference. Your future should not be defined by the limitations of those who left. Your hope should not be determined by the failures of previous relationships. Your expectations should not be permanently shaped by moments of rejection. God has not finished writing your story. There are still chapters ahead filled with growth, connection, purpose, and unexpected blessings. There are still experiences waiting that will restore confidence where disappointment once lived. There are still opportunities waiting that will remind you why perseverance mattered. There are still moments waiting that will make you grateful you did not give up during the difficult seasons. Not every battle you fought was in vain. Not every tear was meaningless. Not every delay was pointless. Sometimes what appears to be a setback is actually a redirection. Sometimes what appears to be a loss is actually preparation. Sometimes what appears to be an ending is simply a transition into something better suited for the person you are becoming. The fact that you survived difficult seasons is evidence of strength. The fact that you continued believing despite uncertainty is evidence of faith. The fact that you are still standing is evidence that there is something within you stronger than every challenge that attempted to defeat you. Never underestimate that strength. Never overlook that resilience. Never forget how far you have already come. The journey has not been easy. The road has not always been clear. Yet here you are, still moving forward, still growing, still learning, still hoping. That alone is remarkable. The people who left were part of the story. but they were never the entire story. Your future remains larger than your disappointments. Your purpose remains greater than your setbacks. Your value remains untouched by every person who failed to recognize it. You are worth far more than the moments that tried to make you feel small. You are more than the losses you experienced. You are more than the loneliness you endured. You are more than the chapters that ended unexpectedly. You are a person whose life still carries meaning, whose heart still carries value, and whose future still carries possibility. And perhaps one day, when you see the relationships, opportunities, and blessings that entered after certain doors closed, you will understand that what felt like everyone leaving was actually God making room for the right people. If this message strengthened your faith and reminded you that your life still holds purpose beyond every disappointment, subscribe to the channel and continue joining a community focused on encouragement, healing, hope, and spiritual growth. May each message help you remember that you are valued, that your journey matters, and that God is still leading you toward the people and purposes meant for your life.